Hi everyone, this video is intended for all students of the ServiceNow Application Development Fundamentals course. In that course, we build an application from start to finish, and it includes making a web service call to dynamically retrieve a password for our loaner devices to be included in a notification. In this video, I'm going to show you two alternative ways to implement that web service requirement. And as a bonus, towards the end of this video, I'm going to show you how you can actually create the notification exclusively in Flow Designer, including making that web service call. So let's get started. In our course, the way that we made the web service call was to embed the web service call directly in an email script that was included in a notification. But in this video, we're going to extrapolate that web service call and make it its own independent thing, its own independent object in the platform. The first way we're going to do that is by creating an outbound REST message. And then the second way by creating a custom action in Flow Designer. Both of these options will then give you the ability to call the web service call, either using an outbound REST message or a Flow action from any server-side script. By creating a custom Flow action, we'll have the additional advantage of actually being able to embed and use that action in any flow that we want to in Flow Designer. So, okay, let's start off by looking at what you should have right now in your test business rule and in your notification. So in my test business rule here, at the moment it's not active. We have a script here to make the web service call. So you can see here the endpoint and the query all combined into one, and some other parameters as well. We have the username and password embedded directly into the script, a big no-no, so we're going to get rid of that in a moment. And then we get the response back and we pass it, and we generate a simple log message here. So this is basically what we have in our notification email script as well. So this is it here. Some slight differences here that I've made with the logging, but essentially it's the same script. And if you recall, you got that script from where? The REST API Explorer in your other instance. So in our test instance, we had a table here of devices and asset tags and passwords. And then in our REST API Explorer, we actually looked up that, or made a query, a sample query to that table. Let me just put in a query here with an asset tag there, and we'll get the password back. It's any field that we want back, and we can select that here. We only want one record back. There should only be one matching, and then we can go down and send that query. We get a 200 response back, and we get the password back. So that's fine. And then you recall you went to ServiceNow script, and you basically just selected that script and put it into your test business rule and then your notification, and you made the corresponding adjustments. Okay, but as we can see here with this test script that we're generating using the REST API Explorer, we've got the credentials embedded right here. Okay, but what if we wanted to make that web service call from other scripts as well? Because at the moment it's embedded into our notification. So let's go to Studio and create a new application file and create a new outbound REST message. We'll just call this asset passwords. I'll leave the description at the moment, and then I will get my endpoint, which would be up here. It's the same one as you used in the script already, but I'll just copy it from here and put it directly in there, followed by the table name. Okay, I think that's the right table name. Password vault, that's the one. Okay, so let's go ahead and save that first of all. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is set up a connection. We need to authenticate. Okay, so we're just going to use basic authentication for this demonstration, but best practice would be to use OAuth 2.0. It's more secure, but takes a little bit longer to set up. But for this demonstration, we're just going to keep it simple. So we're just going to go to basic, and we don't have a authentication profile at the moment. So what you'll need to do is to open up this list here, actually I do have one here, this password instance basic auth configuration profile, you'll need to click on new here and then put in the name of the profile followed by the username and password of your instance. Okay, and then you can go ahead and save that, submit it. But because I've already got one here created for my other instance, I will select it. Okay, which means now when we reference this outbound REST message, we don't need to embed the credentials directly in the script. The message will include what's been referenced here. All right then, so I will save that once more. And now we just need to come down to our HTTP methods. We've got a default GET one already created by the system just because it's a common method that is used for getting data, a common method in web service calls. So let's just open and use that one. We've got the same endpoint here. We're going to inherit and use the same authentication profile that we've just created here. And then under HTTP request, now we can specify our headers and other query parameters that we will use. Okay, so my headers here, sometimes you can get away with not including anything, but it's just safer to specify the defaults here for except being the application JSON, so that's the format that we expect back, and then we are going to send the content also in the same format. Pop that in there. Okay, that's our headers taken care of. Let's go down to our query parameters. These query parameters here are basically what you specify in the REST API Explorer here. Okay, so this query here, we just need to put that into our message. And the easiest way to do that is to specify the field name that you want to query. So in our case, it's going to be the u_asset field. And then the value here, we're not going to hard code it. We're just going to make this a variable. So we'll just put that in a brace there, like that. And that's it. That's all you have to do. I think the only thing that I will do just to make sure that this is working is to test it before we go ahead and use a script to call this message. So we can do that using this UI action down here, test. But before we do, we need to substitute this variable value at the moment with some hard-coded value, so for testing purposes. So the way you can do that is just click on auto-generate variables up here. And that will use the variables that have been listed in the query parameters and create entries here in this related list for variable substitutions. So I've got the parameter here for the field, the U asset. We don't have a test value at the moment, but we can just copy one of the values here from our target table and just pop that in there. Okay, and go ahead and test it. Okay, so we get a 200 response back, which is always good. We've got the parameters and the response here. So because we didn't specify any restriction on the fields that we wanted to get back in the response, we get the entire response, the entire object with all the fields in it. And you can see here that the password is Mercury. And that's what it is. Okay, so that's working. Great. So that's how you would go ahead and create a REST message in ServiceNow. And now we've got the ability to call that independently from any server-side script. And similar to how you did it with the REST API Explorer, you can just go down to your method here. And if you scroll down, you will see a UI action called preview script usage. Okay, so that's the script that you can use in any server-side script, essentially, to call this REST message. And then you'll just make the necessary modifications to it to extract the data from the response and to do with that data as you wish. So we can go ahead now and create a separate test business rule here. So we'll just do that. And I will just call this retrieve credentials and then maybe BR for business rule. Okay, it's going to be based on the learner request table, like that. We're going to tick the advanced checkbox there because we're going to execute a script. When is it going to run? Do you remember? Which one of these options should we select? Web service calls, it should always be asynchronous. Yeah. Okay. And we'll, because this is a test, we'll just make it after every update. Okay. And then in our advanced box here, this is where we can just copy and paste the code from that snippet. So let's go back to our REST message, our default get, go to preview script usage, and then just copy all of that and put that into our business rule right there. I'll just format it here so it looks nice and pretty. Okay, and the first thing we'll need to do is substitute this hard-coded string value here for the query with the current value of the asset tag for the configuration item in the record. So this will be current.cmdb CI and then .walk to that table and pick up the asset tag right there. Okay, so that's done. We've got the call to the REST message and the method that we're going to use, the default get. And then we can come back here. We've got our response here. All we need to do is pass the response. So I am just going to come here and then pop in the code that I have created already elsewhere. And these lines here, I'm going to pass the body. Okay, save that in a variable called pass body. I'm going to extract the password and save that as a variable, pwd, and I'm just going to output that in the log. Okay, so let's go ahead and test that. So I will save it. And then we'll go over to our test record that I've got here. We don't have any other conditions, so we just need to make some update to this. So I will just remove that full stop there. I'm not sure if you saw that. I'll just change that from a 3 to a 2 just to make it clear that that record has changed. Save it. And then come over to our logs there and just refresh the filter. I've got it set to create it on the last minute. And then we can see here this message here. There's the password, outbound REST BR. The password is Venus. Okay. So that is working. Now you can just go ahead and use that script or a modification of that in a business rule, in any server-side script, and you can actually call independently the REST message that we have just defined. Okay, and now for part 2, let's see how we can actually do something similar with a flow action. Okay, so let's go to create application file and create a new flow action here. Okay, so this action will be called get loaner password in our application scope, and I will click on submit. All right, now the inputs for this action that we're going to take, similar to the outbound REST message, will be the asset tag. So let's add that as a input. Just make this a little bit bigger so we can see everything. Create input. I'll just call this asset, and it will be a string and mandatory. Okay, let's go ahead and save that. Okay, so now we can go ahead and add some steps to our action. Now in Integration Hub, you have access to the following step here, REST. Okay, so our actions will be comprised of two steps. It will be comprised first of this REST step. We'll make the REST call, and then it will be followed by this JSON parser step to extract the response and do something with it. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a REST step. Okay, we'll just call this get password. Now we could define the connection and the credentials here directly in line, but we're going to define a connection alias instead. Okay, so we'll go to connection alias. Okay, so I'm going to select one that I've already created earlier. Okay, so we've got the base URL here. What we need to do is actually define the resource path, which is then together with the URL defines the endpoint for our web service connection. So let's go back here and let's just append that part right there. Okay, including the / here, which will be added directly to the end of the URL right here. Okay, so now we can go ahead and add our query parameters and headers as we did earlier. So let's go ahead and add our parameters first of all, which will be the asset tag. And the value of this query will be the input that we get to this action. So we can just drag and drop that data pool straight over there. And I'll add one more query parameter here so that we restrict the response to only the password field and we don't get the entire object back. So I'll put in here syspalm fields, and then we'll just specify the password field. Okay, now let's add some headers. Again, always best practice. So just like we did earlier, we will put the content type as application /JSON, not JSON, but JSON. And we'll add one more where we specify the response format, except. Okay, and that's about it. Okay, so that's our first step done. Okay, so now the next step is to pass that response. So let's go over here to add a new step and come down to JSON parser. So you may have to activate this plugin if it's not already activated. If you don't see it here in this list, just search for JSON parser in your list of plugins and activate it. So we'll do that. Okay, now our source data. So what do we want to pass? Well, it will be the response that we get from the first step. So we can just go to our response body data pool and drag and drop that straight over here. Okay, so now we actually need to define the response that we are passing, that we are getting back. And so the question is, well, what do we actually put in this field and what's this target here and creating object? How do we proceed? Well, the easiest way to do it is if I just save this first, it's just do a test. Okay, so let's just take a record here and let's go to test and use that asset tag here that we know we have a password for and run it. What we really need is just the response back. And then we can just use that as an easy way to build the corresponding object that is outputted. So let's have a look at the details here. All right, so we got an error, but that was expected with our JSON parser because it's not finished yet. But if we scroll down to our steps, and we can see here in our response body, that's what we get back. So it is actually working, that get message. So let's just copy that and go back to our action and then just paste that into the payload here. And then just click somewhere else so that this generate target button activates and click on generate target. And the system will just take that response back and generate the structure of the object that you need. So let me just decrease the resolution here a little bit. And you can see that the password field here is in the result, which is in the result object, which is in the root here. Okay. And you can see on the right hand side, we have our corresponding data pools. All right. So that is our action completed. Let's go ahead and save it. So the next thing to do will be to generate some outputs from our action. So let's come over to outputs and create a new one here. And we'll just call this response body. Keep it nice and simple. And response body there as well. And we'll make this an object because that's actually what we're getting. And then I'll go to exit edit mode here. And as you can see now, I've got a space to put in a data pool. So I can just drag and drop the root object from the JSON parser step and pop it straight in there. Okay, so now if we save that, we can test it once more. So let's go and test. And we'll put in that, oops, not that, but we will put in the asset tag again. Okay, let's have a look at the execution details. And we can see here that the action has taken some input, that asset tag there, and has generated some output, including the response body. So that's actually what we'll use in our script. So the great thing about this feature as well, building actions, is that you can actually call them independently using server-side scripts. So you can use them in Flow Designer, but you can use them in your scripts as well. So let me cancel that and publish it. And once you do publish an action, then you'll have the ability to copy a code snippet. So let's come over to our context menu and go to create code snippet. And that's the one that we can use. So similar to the code snippets that you can get elsewhere on the platform, I'm just going to copy that and close it and then come back to my ServiceNow Studio and create a new business rule. So let's do that. Let's come here and create yet another business rule. And we'll call this one retrieve credentials again, but this time with a flow action. It will be also based on the learner request table. We'll select advanced and when to run after every update or before every update. Actually, not before. We know this, don't we? Async. And then we go to advanced and then I can just pop the code straight in there. Okay, I'm going to make a couple of small modifications here. The first one, the most necessary one, is to actually provide a value for our asset input. At the moment, we don't have one. So similar to what we did before, we'll just put in the value of the asset tag of the configuration item in the current record, like so. And then what I will do is come down here and I'm just going to paste a couple of lines here just to generate the log, the password in the log. So, oops. So I'm just extracting the password here and then just putting that into a log entry. So let's go ahead and submit that and test it once more. Okay, so we'll go back to our learner request record again. We'll just make an update to this and change this to K23 and save that. And let's have a look at our log entries now. Okay, so we can see we've actually got an error here. We've got response body is not defined. Okay, so let's go back to that script again, and I copied and pasted something from earlier, so it is not taking into account the new variable name here that I've got without the capital B here. So let me just change that to a small b, and then I think we should be okay. So if we go back to our learner request again, I'm going to change this again to 23, changed it back before to test again. And now if we come to our logs and refresh, we've got the password outputted from a business rule from a server-side script that's calling a flow action. So that's how you would go about doing that. Okay. Okay, everyone, thanks for staying to the end of the video. I've got a reward for you, some bonus material about how to create a notification in Flow Designer using that custom action that we've just created to make that dynamic web service call. Okay, so let's get started. Let's go ahead and create a new flow. And we'll call this Loaner Pick Up Notification. Okay, so our trigger will be similar to the one that we had earlier when a record is updated in our loaner request table. So loaner request, and then the conditions when the state changes to ready for pickup, and maybe when the configuration item field is not empty, etc. You could actually combine this flow maybe with the state model flow that we created earlier in the course. So I'll just leave it like that for the moment. You can figure the rest out for yourself in the trigger, but we'll just keep it simple here. So done. And then we'll go ahead and add an action. But what I'm going to do first is add some flow logic here. So I'm actually going to do a try. Okay, I'm not sure if you've seen this before in Flow Design. You can actually try to do something. If you get an error, do something else. Generate an error message in the log or whatever. Okay, so within my try section here, I'm actually going to go ahead and call that custom action, which will be in my loaner request spoke now. You can see that there, get loaner password. If you recall, it had one input, and that input will be the asset tag from the request. So let's go over to our data pills and come down to that configuration item. Oops. And then bring over the asset tag, just like that. Okay. All right. Done. All right. Now the next step I'm going to do, because we are getting an array back potentially of values in our response, we'll actually need to do a loop here. So we'll actually need to put in a for each here for each item that we find, even though we've only got one record really that we're working with. This is something that you'll probably need to do, I think, in my experience, when working with response objects from in JSON format. We have an array of data that you want to work through, because the system won't know what record to get if you've got multiple ones with different values. So we'll do a for each in here, and then we'll come over and get in our step 2 in our response body for every result that we get, in other words, in that array. Okay, we are going to do, and now within this for each here, so right here, this little plus icon here, not the one next to it on the left, but the one within the for each, then we can go ahead and start sending emails. Or in this case, it'll just be one email, because we've only got one object to work with, only one record to work with. And then we can bring over the loaner request record from our trigger, be the target record. And then 2 will be the requester. So let's just bring that over. Requested for, rather. There we go, that one there. The subject, and then we could take maybe the item type from the request. So loaner request record, and scroll down to our item type. There it is. Your item type record space is ready to be picked up. Okay. All right. And then we can put in the regular things that we want to put in here. So dear, and then the name of the requester. There we go. Just pop that in there. Requested for, and yeah, your device is ready to be picked up from, and then we can put the depot in there, as we did with our original notification. But the real thing that we want to show here is just getting the password. So let me quickly put in the depot right there. Okay, sometimes that happens. Let me just put that in the right spot. Just there we go. And then I'll just put in a reference here to password. Okay. So now I'll come over to my for each, to my result object there, and then I can just grab the password and then just drag that over in there. And again, just put it in the right place, not at the beginning of the email, and that should be fine. So you may find that if you don't do that for each loop, if you don't have that for each loop in your flow, you won't be able to get the password because there could be potentially multiple records in that array with different values. So if you do that, then you'll see that this data pool will be active and you can use it in your notification or whatever other action you want to use it for. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this. Let's save it. Okay, I'm going to use the same request we've been working on previously. So let's just take that, even though the conditions may not necessarily be correct or matching the condition here, but that's okay. Let's go to test and pop that in there and run it. Okay, so let's have a look. Well, we couldn't have a look at the log, but let's maybe take a quick look at the notification. Hopefully we've got one here in our emails there. Let's just refresh this list. Okay, your laptop is ready to be picked up. Let's take a look at the content of that email. Let's scroll down and go to preview email. There we go. Okay, we've got the details that we want to put in the email. You can fill these in as you like, but the most important thing is that we've actually made use of that custom action to make a web service call to our other instance to obtain the password. So that's how you would go ahead and create the notification exclusively in Flow Designer, taking advantage again of that custom action that we built earlier. Okay, so thanks for watching everyone and good luck with your future development.